So our first presenter is Jason Heath. Jason is the Director of Technical Programs for the Ohio River Valley Water Sanitation Commission, or ORSANCO. He's also the chair of the Mining Impacts Committee and co-chair of the Toxics Committee for the Ohio River Basin Alliance Ohio River Basin Restoration Plan, which will be the primary focus of his talk today. So without further ado, Jason, if you could connect your screen and take it away.
All right. Is that looking
Yes.
Perfect.
good? Okay. So I'm going to talk briefly today about an Ohio River Basin restoration plan that is currently under development. The Ohio River Basin Alliance is really the lead group on this, but ORSANCO has quite a bit of involvement in it. My boss is really one of the folks that my boss, Richard Harrison, he's the director here, and he's really kind of spearheaded this whole initiative. Okay, great. So I don't know if everyone is very familiar with the Ohio River Basin Alliance. It came out of, originally there was an Ohio River Basin Association, which was similar to ORSANCO, but not quite the same. And so they are defunct, and what came out of that is this Ohio River Basin Alliance. I just cut and pasted this off of their website. It's a collaborative, for a unified voice of the stakeholders, really for water issues in the Ohio Basin. I guess there are about 130 organizations that are part of it. It's a nonprofit, and they developed a plan for the Ohio River Basin, which the Army Corps of Engineers really had a lead on, as well as ORSANCO and ORBA. So that plan specifies that we will put together a restoration plan, and the objectives of the restoration plan really are to get funding for the Ohio Basin for water issues. This is just a graphic of the entire Ohio River Basin. I'm sure most folks are familiar with it. 14 states, 200,000 square miles. So it's a fairly large area. Why is this being done? There are a number of geographic programs throughout the country that are receiving a lot of money. The Great Lakes Restoration Initiative, you can see $320 million. I'm not sure if that's annual or over what period. And then there are a number of other basins, river basins, and also, like San Francisco Bay, and that they're all basically all receiving funding. EPA has program offices there that manage that funding, and so we're hoping that we can have a Ohio River Basin Restoration Initiative, kind of modeled after the Great Lakes. With the infrastructure investment, this is just another reason why this is being done. You can see all the money that was thrown out with the infrastructure investment, but $0 for the Ohio Basin. So this slide basically there was a Ohio River Restoration Plan. The Corps of Engineers put it together, but basically it specifies that we are going to develop this restoration initiative, which we are in the process of doing at this time. There are a number of subcommittees that have been established to develop that restoration initiative plan. You can see the categories, and again, it was kind of modeled after Great Lakes to some extent. So we have subcommittees for each of these. I chair the acid mine drainage, and so there's going to be a chapter in this restoration initiative for each one of these subcommittees, which basically spells out what needs to be done and how much it's going to cost. And so basically this is going to kind of be the way that restoration initiative is laid out for each one of those subcommittees. There'll be a chapter. They'll propose 3 to 5 long-term goals. I just kind of lined out what we did for the mining impacts subcommittee. And then short-term actions, things that would be completed in the first 5 years, and then indicators, milestones, and outcomes. You can see for the mining impacts group, we try to specify dates of when things will be done. We don't have costs at this time, but I will be working on that. Basically, states will design and implement comprehensive monitoring programs to identify all mining impacts. And then it goes on to specify how much of the mines will be reclaimed by when, with the goal being to restore waters that are impacted by mining in the Ohio Basin. So when this restoration plan is completed, the idea is to try to get congressional representatives on board with it. And so if they can spearhead this, then maybe we can get the funding, have an EPA program office established, and then start working on the initiative with, the idea that the funds would primarily go to, a lot of it would go to the states, but but other entities as well. So one of the things we're doing with that to try to make the case is to show stream impairments in the Ohio Basin. This is a map of all the stream impairments in the Ohio Basin. I think it was, we created it as of July 2022, and it would have been based on each of the states' stream impairments lists or 303D lists. So you can see there's quite a few streams. We summarized on a state-by-state basis. I'm not sure how easy this is for you folks to see, but basically what percentage of streams in the states are impaired, and then what are the causes in terms of pollutants. And I realize you can't read the pollutants, but they're on the bottom, and they're ranked by number of stream miles of impairments, and this for the whole basin. We mapped it together from each of the states. This table just shows the pollutants causing those impairments. Again, this shows where we got the data sources for those stream impairments, because when patching this kind of thing together, states get a little concerned. They want to make sure that it's accurate, basically. So do we. We did the same thing for lakes. And so I won't really go through it, but so that's about what I have to share. I think, let me scroll through. No, that's it. So that's what I have to share, and I can take questions. I think the schedule is to have this restoration initiative plan completed, hopefully this summer, and then by this fall to really start going out and trying to get congressional support. So with that, I will take questions.
Thanks, Jason. And everyone, feel free to unmute yourself, or if you'd rather put your questions in the chat, that's okay too.
Jason, thanks for the sort of slide with where the IIJA funds were going. That was pretty stellar slide, sort of illustrating the impact of what we all know is true for the Ohio, and certainly the money's been spread around a little bit here, a little bit there, but you guys kind of always end up missing the boat somehow or another. So
Yeah.
if you're going to share your slide deck, I'd appreciate that, because that's a really great slide to think for folks working in the Ohio to have in their back pocket whenever they go and meet with folks.
I can send this presentation to, I guess, Rachel. And
Yes, and we'll send those out with the recording as well. Thank you.
great. Thanks.
And Jason, can folks find a published report on the website, maybe with the findings of, impairment by state and those figures?
So basically what I'm showing you there is what I have so far.
Okay.
So that, but all of that will be included in the presentation.
Okay, thank you.
I don't think that's been made public yet. It's not on our website, I don't believe. But you're welcome to, anybody's welcome to use it, take it and share it with whoever you want.
Thank you.
Jason, I noticed that basically most of Ohio was considered impaired, and it was, I don't know, the graphic looked different from everything else. And
Yes.
so what is with the fact that Ohio's special there?
So, well, we think they're all special. But aside from that, it's basically the way Ohio reports their impaired streams, and we've showed this to them, and maybe they'll change the way they report their impairments in the future so that they don't look that way. Yes, it looks like the whole state within the Ohio Basin is impaired, but the way they report is on a watershed basis instead of an individual stream basis. So they do probabilistic monitoring, and if that indicates impairment, rather than just designating an individual stream as impaired, they report the entire watershed as impaired. So basically, that's why that looks that way. In reality, every state has their own monitoring programs, and they're all different. They have all their own methodologies for how they designate impairments based on that monitoring data. And so they're all going to be different, but I don't believe in the, in reality, Ohio is more than likely not any worse than anybody else. Yeah, I mean, but you can take a look at West Virginia and Indiana and Pennsylvania versus like Kentucky and Tennessee. And I would imagine it's a function of their monitoring and their the way they make decisions about impairments and reporting. But
Thank you.
probably in reality, there's not huge differences.
Right, thanks.
Any other questions for Jason? All right, thank you, Jason. If you want to stop sharing your screen.
I will. Thanks for
Thank you
the
very much.
opportunity to present.
Awesome. So our next speaker is John Detisch. John is speaking on behalf of the Harry Enstrom Chapter of the Izaak Walton League of America and a project that he spearheaded to create an online imagery map of the Monongahela River.
And I am going to try to share my screen as we're going through. Good morning, everyone. A few years ago, one of our members came across an abandoned remediation, AMD remediation site. Trying to find out a little bit about this, we found that it was probably the oldest passive system in the United States. Went to talk to one of our local politicians to see if we could get grant money to get this back in operation. And his comment to me was, give me something in writing. He said, no more than 2 pages, because anything more, the politicians wouldn't be able to handle it. And he said, and give me a lot of pictures. Later on, we're working on another issue where we found a mine drainage site that was dumping right into the Monongahela. And again, trying to find out some more information about that. Talked to a person I know in Bureau of Mines, and gave him the location and so forth. He said, let me look into this. And he came back and said, well, we don't have anything on that, and but contact this person. So I talked to another person at Bureau of Mines, and he gave me the information. In the course of the conversation, I said, do you talk to each other? And he goes, no, not really. So within one, I'm going to say, office, there are definitely silos. And then I said, well, you're dumping this right into the Mon. I said, do you realize that less than a mile downstream, you have a freshwater intake for a city? And there was just silence. And then later I talked to someone from the city and said, how's your water? You're having problems with your fresh water. How's that working? He goes, oh, we stopped our plant. We kept on getting fined for heavy metals. And I'm thinking, well, gee, this is a good place to go and look. So basically what we found, or what I thought was, we have a situation where we're not talking to each other. And then I had the opportunity to get involved with ORBA, and I think it's really great that I have the opportunity to follow Jason, because I've been in my non-scientific way, working on the AMD sites with Jason. So the next part of this meeting was had the opportunity to meet with people from Earthviews, and they basically started, showed me some of the work that they were doing. And so with this, we got together with Three Rivers Waterkeeper, and CalU, and came up with a plan that we were going to take a look at the Monongahela and try to document what is going on in the river. We're going to be able to provide the pictures that our politicians said was very much needed, and then provide short information, again, that people could use. The idea with this is that we can have a multiple users. Someone who wants to recreate, and again, the idea was to create, as you see over on the other side, we have layers. So the idea was to create 3 layers or 3 chapters. One layer would be recreation. So where can I put a kayak? Where are loading docks? And that type of information. And then using streetscape, look at, well, if I pull into Brownsville, can I go get a sandwich someplace? So again, trying to bring people down to the river. We really believe that we're not going to see any real improvements until people actually, start taking ownership of this. So the first layer is creating recreation and showing people that, you can come down and use the river. The next chapter is clean water. And again, identifying where those A and B sites and how that is affecting the river, while also identifying CSOs and then getting people involved. If they're paddling down the Mon and they see water being discharged from a CSO, can they report it? We have 3 sewage treatment plants on a Mon that are taking fracking waste from landfills. So again, identifying those, and through this, not trying to be antagonistic, but just these are the facts. And the third part of this is to create a healthy ecosystem. So what do we have? What's going on along the Mon? So I mean, just as we did this, the photography for this, we found an eagle's nest in Charleroi that was up in a crane. There are places where we have beaver, but along with that, what about human health? And so trying to get information about that. So the idea with this whole, and then the last part of this is crowdsourced. So when we finish this, and hopefully it will never be finished. So as people come down to the river and they see something that can be added onto this application. But the idea is that we can use this for a multiple reasons. We take a look at Jason. So if I want to go and talk to a politician about a problem, I can bring this and I have a picture to demonstrate what I'm talking about. If I want to go down to the river for the weekend and paddle, I can say, okay, I would like to do this section, and I can take a look at the river and see what I'm looking at. I can look at, the industrial pass of the pits of Western Pennsylvania and see a lot of, as you see here, parts of the coal industry and how the barges were being used. As a conservation group, if I see a place that I have invasive species, or I need to do a shore cleanup, again, I can identify where we can put in and so forth, and where the likely places are that I would be picking up trash. So this has a multitude of opportunities for a wide variety of people. And the last thing is, hopefully, we will provide sufficient amount of information so that people can learn about the Mon. It's something, we live by it, we know it's there, but we just don't know too much about it. So we take a look at from a transportation point of view, from a ecological point of view, from a biology point of view. There's a lot that we can learn here. At this point in time, basically, the only thing we have not been able to do all of them on. We've gone from Pittsburgh down to Point Marion, and we haven't done any part of West Virginia. So my plea to you is, if you know of anyone who would like to do the photography from Fairmont to Point Marion, I would really like to talk to them. And again, we're still gathering information. The other part of this story, as Jason talked about, going to the States and getting information. I know when Pennsylvania put in abandoned mines, and there were a few, and I'm thinking, oh, just off the top of my head, I can name a dozen sites that just are along the Mon, and that was more than what Pennsylvania had provided. And as I talked to people, I said, oh yeah, I said, we've got iron oxide flowing out of the stream behind our house. We've become accustomed to mine drainage, and of course with the rains, we're seeing more and more of the mines filling up and springing leaks, so to speak. So hopefully we are able to create lists that people are able to use, and then those infrastructure dollars that we can use this type of app to get money and improve the situation. So again, I would love to, if you have information that you think would be good to put on here, I would love to talk to you. If you know someone who would be willing to do the West Virginia portion of the Monongahela, I would love to talk to you. And I have to admit, the whole scheme of this is to do the Monongahela watershed. So we have, the big parts of this is we have the Tiger, the Cheat, the Youghiogheny. So we can love to put that in. I mean, that is the ultimate goal with this. And, like I said, what this does, because of the camera we're using, we can move down the river, but because it's a camera voice of video, we can have that detail. And as you see on the GIS side of the map, there are two blue lines. The Mon is sufficiently wide that we actually had to photograph both sides of the river so that we could get a good idea of what the shoreline is. So that's why there are two sections to this. And like I said, so as I look at layers, like any GIS map, I can go click, I can go in and say, show me the abandoned mine sites. I can also say, okay, I want to go to this area here, and I can click on it. And again, here we got some bollards for tying up barges and so forth. Does anyone have any questions?
I did put a link in the chat for the EarthViews website for the Mon, if anybody is interested in checking it out.
Like I said, at this point in time, the only thing we have is the photography.
Right, so you're still working on adding in the recreational layers and things like that.
Oh, yes, the three layers, yes. And I have to put in a plug. This was all due. We received 2 grants, run from Martin's in Key, Pennsylvania. Beautiful. That was to do the Fayette County portion of the Mon, and the other came from the Izaak Walton Endowment.
And I'll just add that I see Jan is on the call from upstream Pittsburgh. If you go to the EarthViews website and you zoom in on the map to the Pittsburgh area, you'll see another project, and that was done by upstream Pittsburgh and formerly 9 Mile Run Watershed Association. So you should be able to find them on there.
John, talking about Keep PA Beautiful, Shannon Ryder and her crew have developed an app for recreational users to be able to document sort of pollution along waterways as they're out recreating. So that might be something to double back around with her about, to see if there's a way that you might be able to either just link that app on your platform, or to be able to pull some of that information into your platform through that link as well.
And I think that's a very important part, Brandon. I mean, there's a lot of information that, you know, if we put that on this app, that you would never be able to navigate it. So what we hope to do is, you know, give you a taste of what's out there, but then give you links to the various sites so that you can go and get more information. And again, as I'm doing this, I'm amazed that I'm finding a great deal of information, but, you know, and I think that's one of the things, you really have to go out and hunt for things. So, you know, not that I would, I mean, I would love to have everyone look at this, but if we find it, you know, that hopefully we're bringing together and creating a very, very large silo and trying to eliminate some, you know, the multitude of them. But yeah, there's the idea is to have a lot of links on here that people can go to get more information, more correct information. Thank you.
Any other questions for John?
I just wanted to say kudos for some excellent work. I think this is very exciting. And I know down here in West Virginia, we're looking for opportunities for funding to try to get some of the video needed for our neck of the woods.
Well, like I said, Melissa, if you're looking for part of this, we have funding. Right now I have the money, I just don't have any place to spend it.
Yeah, we'll continue to see if we can't find somebody with a boat that can get out there to get the footage for you.
Okay, so I would greatly appreciate it.
Well, thank you, John.
Okay, thank you very much. I was able to stop sharing.
The practice paid off. Our last speaker will be John Wenzel. John is the executive director of the Conemaugh Valley Conservancy, and so he'll be speaking about his organization and how they work with smaller watersheds within as well.
Sorry, guys, I muted myself and then you can't unmute when you're sharing. Okay, let's try this again. All right. Do we see the otter?
Yes,
Okay,
looks good.
good. All right, well, my name is John Wenzel and I am the executive director at Conemaugh Valley Conservancy. I only started in this role less than a year ago, so pretty much everything I'm talking about here happened before I got here. Previously, I was a professor of entomology at Ohio State for 17 years, and then 10 years I was the director of the Powder Mill Nature Reserve, which is the research field station of the Carnegie Museum of Natural History. And at Powder Mill, I became interested in issues of water quality and used my entomological experience to do a couple of things that are helpful. We composed with National Science Foundation money and a number of other partners this teaching and reference website, macroinvertebrates.org, and it includes about 160 genera of macroinvertebrates that are useful in water quality analyses. These are gigapixel images. It turns your computer screen into a microscope that you can drive. You can zoom in, you can get really close. You can see the dorsal or ventral aspect. It's annotated so that the website will tell you, look right here, does it have one claw or two, that kind of thing. And there is a tutorial, but we actually designed it so you can just hack it, because I think people don't really read directions. Another thing we did was to take the DEP data. It was 1.2 million specimens at 6,000 locations for Pennsylvania. And we created a GIS map where you can click on the dot and see what was collected at that site. When we showed this off to the DEP, they got excited. And so they copied it, made their own website that is very much like the one we made. We had a few other bells and whistles in there, but theirs is really up to date and very well done. We didn't see any reason for two of them. So we stopped supporting ours, and now we direct people to the DEP site. It's actually very useful to be able to look at these data. And one of the things you learn is that you can't sample 7,000 sites annually. So a lot of these data date from 2010 or something. And I would argue that that's no longer really adequate for our purposes. Okay, so now we'll talk about Conemaugh Valley Conservancy. I started last year, but Conemaugh Valley Conservancy has been around since 1994, and it was originally started because of perceived need in Johnstown and nearby for some kind of a 501c3 that could apply for grants and manage these projects that were oriented towards conservation and preservation of the natural resources around us, and also try to build healthy recreational opportunities for people, with the idea that if you get out in nature and you enjoy it, then you're much more likely to become active in environmental protection of some sort. The Conemaugh Valley itself is pretty darn big. It's almost 2,000 square miles. You can see in the lower panel here where it is in Pennsylvania. It spans parts of 5 counties, and it's the largest subwatershed of the Allegheny. It's actually a very scenic area. This straight line, I don't know if you can really see my mouse moving, the straight line that says Laurel Ridge includes the Conemaugh Gorge, which is one of the deepest gorges in eastern North America. And then the Chestnut Ridge, which is to the west, has a gorge in it, Pack Saddle Gap, which is really beautiful. And these areas, plus many of the little tributaries, are actually quite a substantial natural resource for beauty and recreation. So one of the first things CVC did was it initiated a project to create a river conservation plan for the Conemaugh Valley. At the time that it was published in 1999, it was the second largest basin in Pennsylvania that had a plan. This was updated in 2017. And as anyone who lives in Western Pennsylvania or nearby knows, a lot of the threat is from the historical coal mining industry and related things like steel mine. This photo here shows you a refuse pile from a coal mine, and it's deliberately been put right next to the stream. They did this in the old days so that that waste would go away, right? This audience is probably pretty well educated to this, but there are plenty of legacy issues with this sort of industry. And some of them are quite visible. For instance, the aluminum, which is more toxic actually than iron, harder to get out of the water, frequently colors water white or blue. This pond that you see here is a kind of a settling pond where, because there is so much aluminum in the water, the pond looks like that blue all year. The one on the right is iron and sulfur, which is more typical, you know, the Orange Creek out back, that kind of thing. But also on the bottom here, you see a forest dead zone. This is where the AMD isn't on the surface. It's actually just plain leaching through the soil itself. And so there's a dead zone where nothing can grow because the AMD is underground. And in the background, that's Stony Creek, which you're going to hear more about. So one of the principal current activities of CVC is to chaperone monitoring programs with the idea of directing this information back to the DEP and try to get restoration efforts in place, or make sure that the restoration efforts we already have, treatment systems that are already operational, that they're properly maintained, as witnessed by the chemistry of the water coming out. This is a pretty big effort. We sample more than 100 sites. I know in the fourth quarter of 2022, it was 107 sites. That number changes depending on, sometimes we decommission sites that we're no longer worried about. We add new sites for exploration. But just to give you an idea, if you're collecting at this is an old mine entrance that's bleeding out orange stuff. We get 3 samples per site, 100 sites, that's 300, 4 times a year. You know, this is really a great amount of effort, and the DEP can't possibly do this by itself. And so what about that? Well, all these data go into the effort to try to rehabilitate the landscape, and that has been successful, particularly in the Conemaugh Valley. It's been very successful. So here's some data. This is from the updated 2017 report that CVC put out. On the top, these are fish at Glessner Bridge, that's south of Johnstown. And in 1983, there were only 6 species of fish at that site. By 2015, 14 species of fish. That's pretty good. If we look down on the lower left, these are fishes at Summerhill, that's well north of Johnstown, north and east. Numbers of fish, 1999, only 3 fish at that site. By 2008, 11 fish. And then over here on the right, these are the number of trout, the number of individual fishes caught in Tulick Creek, which is up by Indiana, PA. And in 1980, only 24, oops. And by 2010, 174. So you can see this is working. The fish are coming back, the rivers are coming back, and this is the payoff for all the work that we and others do. Then there's the part about getting people to enjoy the outdoors so that they'll help defend it. One of our events is a 4-day river sojourn. It goes through both of the gaps that I mentioned, and it's actually a wonderful event. They feed you and they carry your boat around for you and provide transportation. It's really great. This past year we had 50 boats on the river. And then there's the West Penn Trail Triathlon, which goes down our West Penn Trail, which I'll show you in a moment. That triathlon is quite popular. We get 120 people. They come from all over, and it includes a kayak and canoe portion, of course, and it's held alongside the West Penn Trail. So what's the West Penn Trail? This is a trail that was built on the old mainline canal, and we own this property or lease it from the state or Army Corps of Engineers. And it runs basically from Blairsville in southern Indiana County along the Conemaugh, 17 miles to Salzburg, and then it connects to the Westmoreland Heritage Trail. This was quite an effort. There are several bridges over the Conemaugh that were abandoned by the rail lines because when the dam was built, that area would flood. And in fact, this pale blue area is an entire lake when the dam is holding back floodwaters. So this is all flooded. We had to rebuild 3 of these bridges. I guess we had to rebuild 2 of the bridges, renovate 1, and then we had to build 1 anew. There was no bridge there, and we put it there. Now we also have permission and funding to span Route 22 at Blairsville, so that we can connect this to the Ghost Town Trail, which is 47 miles long. Yeah. And eventually we anticipate connecting this thing ultimately to Pittsburgh. As you can see, our trail runs all along the Conemaugh. And if you're not familiar with this, I recommend you do this section called the Lake District. Because it's an old rail line, it's really pretty flat and easy to do. And this is really very beautiful, and you get to see these really nice vistas over the Conemaugh. We have a couple of other trails that run along creeks and rivers in the Johnstown area too. This is the trail building has been a long time interest to CVC. And then further away from the water, building mountain bike trails on the cliff by the inclined plane in Johnstown and also around Quemahoning Reservoir, which brings us to, I think, one of the best things CVC's ever done. CVC chaperoned through a $6 million purchase in 2002 of 5 dams that held back these large reservoirs. These were originally built by the heavy industry in Johnstown to provide water for their industry. So for instance, the Bethlehem steel plant in Johnstown required 80 million gallons of water per day. Where does that come from? Well, when those industries left, then they didn't need these reservoirs anymore. And the people who ran CVC and other citizens were worried that some enterprising capitalist would buy up this land and put luxury condos around it. So they chaperoned through the purchase of these reservoirs and dams, which includes 5,200 acres of landscape. And that's all now for public access. They also put a valve that cost about $1 million in the bottom of the Quemahoning Dam so that you can control the outflow and you can open it up and flood Stony Creek to create whitewater experiences, which they do on alternate weekends in the season. And this creates really a wonderful opportunity. Stony Creek, which is a beautiful creek, and because of our AMD efforts, is now actually a clean creek. It was formerly a dead creek, but it's not anymore. Actually, Stony Creek is the name, and this is a river, so it's not a creek. And Stony Creek River includes a canyon that has quite a few rapids. And when you're down near the bottom of it, near Johnstown, we built, well, not we, I didn't have anything to do with it, of course, but by placing boulders and arranging the river bottom, we created a whitewater park that's designed for kayak and tubing. And this is very popular, as I said, on alternate weekends in season. We get a lot of people coming in from all over, and it's really a wonderful opportunity. I think it's the only place in the eastern US that is designed as a whitewater park, and you can control the water. So CVC has been very busy in a number of activities that relate both to habitat monitoring and restoration and to getting people out there so that they enjoy the outdoors, with the idea, of course, that if people enjoy doing this, then they're going to help us protect it in the future. I'm very pleased to be connected to CVC in this regard. And it's a little bit personal. It turns out I have always really admired certain artists, including George Hetzel, who was the founder of the Scalp Level School. And this particular painting is one of my favorites of all time, the Rocky Gorge from 1869. Hetzel mostly worked in the Upper Conemaugh region and around Pittsburgh, and he was inspired by the beautiful landscape and often painted what's now called Paint Creek. And one of the things that is interesting to me is that from way back before I ever moved to Pennsylvania, I admired this landscape, and now here I am in a position to help restore it. And so it's rather personal for me. Thank you.
Thanks so much, John. Questions for John?
I can say I've got a new list of places to go visit in your area. Checking out Brandon's link that he shared. It's such a gorgeous place, and we really enjoyed mountain biking around the Quemahoning. Didn't know how to pronounce it the first time we went, but we've learned.
Yeah, I didn't know that either. These things are not always pronounced the same way. I've heard people pronounce the Kiski-Conemaugh River quite a number of ways, and don't know how you say it in Lenape, but.
I think the exciting thing about that too, Melissa, is that the work that's going on within the Little Conemaugh, the expectation is that it will become more of a recreational destination than the Stony Creek. And certainly the Stony Creek has set a high bar and a great example for what can be done whenever you invest a lot of money. So there's been more than $12 million invested. That was an old number. I'm guessing that number is closer to 18 or 20 by now for the Stony Creek, and sort of the people that have come on board with doing that, CVC, other partners. Paint Creek is ridiculous, Dark Shade is ridiculous, but if those come back on board, it's easily the whitewater destination for the country, because you'd be able to do the Little Conemaugh, Paint Creek, as well as going down the Stony Creek too, if you planned it right with the whitewater release. So it's pretty amazing. And then there's been a good bit of work done too downstream of the Queen Reservoir. As we all know, reservoirs just like make straight shots out of reservoirs and kind of make them devoid of habitat. So there's been a good bit of work that's been going into creating a tailwater fishery there as well. There's a cold water release that comes out of the Queen thanks to that, valving as well. So creating a fishery opportunity out of a stream that was once orange and devoid of life is pretty cool. So kudos to all the people that are doing that work.
Yeah, I think I'd like to take this opportunity also to cite one of my pet peeves, which is that pretty much all of us in environmental preservation tell our stories starting from the doom and gloom side about how bad things are. And at minimum, that's only half the story. But, the idea that the house is on fire isn't really the most attractive story. And I think we should have a portfolio of these success stories that show people that we can win these things. And a couple of the things I talked about here, particularly Stony Creek and Little Conemaugh, these are big success stories. We really won a difficult battle on that. And I think this is more common than people reflect. I see bald eagles so often that they're not worth commenting on anymore. And when I was a kid, we thought that species was going extinct. We can win these things. And I think it's important to do that, to demonstrate that and to explain that. It's just as important as getting people out in the canoes on the river to show them that if you get behind us and push, you can get someplace. It's going to be a good thing. And I think it would be good if we looked around and found some of these success stories and made our own little poster children stories about places where these restoration efforts have been very successful. And don't you want to help us with the one we're on right now? Come on, you'll like it and we'll win.
It speaks to John's comment about silos again, because certainly there's some stories like that Power's working on. There's some stories like that the AML campaign in PA is working on as well. It's where do you put that so that everybody sees it? But it's a good point. And John, I think, made a good point too, is so much of this work that we do, people have kind of become blind to it. It's been this way. I don't remember it being any other way. I learned to live with it. And certainly, John, you're shaking your head, but you go to Central City and some of these other communities and people are like, I don't understand why we've got windmills coming to town. We still have coal in the ground and the streams are already orange. So it's not like we're going to damage them anymore. A little bit of a battle there in terms of working to get past that barrier as well.
Yeah, you're quite right about that. A recent survey of citizens in Johnstown, they all think the river is still dead. So they don't know that we rehabilitated it. And one of my colleagues who helps us with sampling told me that when he was a kid, they had the feeling if you came across an orange creek in the woods, that meant upstream from there was a profitable town. And I don't know what's going on with my video, but so we need to do something about this to get the story out that the rivers aren't dead and thank you for rescuing me there. The rivers aren't dead and the Orange Creek that you remember, that we can fix that. We need some education on that.
Oh, one side note to that, John, and I'll let you run with this, but talk to Len Licklar from Somerset County Conservation District, because, and I think it's still on video somewhere, the dedication for the Boswell passive treatment system was amazing. There was an elderly lady there that gave some remarks, and she said that whenever she was a child, she would fish nearby, and she never caught anything. And she just thought that she was bad at fishing because her parents didn't have the ability to explain to her that the stream was dead. That just wasn't normal to them. And it was something that they didn't think a child would understand. So she always thought that she was just bad at fishing. But now she takes her grandchild to that same location where she never caught a fish, and they spend time fishing there, and he catches buckets of them. So I think that that's kind of like, it pulls at all the right heartstrings, because you got Graham there, and then you've got the connection of the environment and everything else like that. I think he tells a pretty powerful story.
All right, well, I think we owe all of our speakers a big round of applause. Thank you all so much. And I'll turn it over to Becca. Becca, if you have any last minute housekeeping type items.
Yeah. So thank you so much, everyone, for joining us for today's installment and also the whole series. I will be sending out links to the recording as well as the presentation slides. So yes, thanks again and have a great day.